Okay, I'm going to try to continue the story here. I'm just going to ramble because, in my opinion, I've had a very interesting experience, and I really don't regret any of it. I mean, you could imagine that I regret being thrown out of UCLA because that cost me a rather lucrative career in the drug industry. I know several people who make a lot of money working in the drug industry, and I could have done very well as a research chemist. And I kind of wonder what I missed out on, but I don't regret it. And I've lived a hard and difficult life since then. I spent 25 years living in my car, which is something that people don't know how to relate to. I didn't see that coming. I didn't ask for it. I didn't expect it. As a matter of fact, I kept expecting that I was going to be kidnapped and put into service making drugs for some powerful people who had a lot of money. I did have the experience of being offered the position of being a big meth chemist, but that's a story much further down the line. I want to go back to my UCLA experience and kind of put it into perspective by highlighting what my experience had been up until that time. I dropped out of high school and then I went back and got thrown out because I got two girls pregnant at about the same time. I had a lot of girlfriends when I was a teenager, and then I lost my hair, and that kind of messed things up. I went bald when I was 21. And so I spent, from the time of being 21 years of age to 33 years of age, I lived in my parents' basement. And I read a lot and listened to music and smoked a lot of pot. And then I began hanging out in the library and then in the university, Furman University. I eventually fell in love with the writings of Isaac Newton and decided that I wanted to become a chemist, or a scientist actually. And, secretly I was interested in chemistry because I like drugs. But anyway, I spent 3 years getting a 2-year degree from Greenville Tech. And in my last year, I spent my last year as a tutor for student support services. Basically, if you were a student at Greenville Tech and you wanted tutoring, they would pay for it. And I was basically the only tutor they had that could tutor in math, chemistry, and physics. And Greenville Tech has a very large nursing department. And I was very popular with the young nursing students, and so I went through a string of girlfriends that I met by tutoring them. And so I was not a frustrated young man sexually. And then anyway, I left. I got my degree from Greenville Tech, and then I went to Furman University, where I had been hanging out in the library and discovered Sir Isaac Newton. And I spent 2 years at Furman and made all A's in chemistry. I could write my ticket to go anywhere I wanted. And I can't remember, I don't think I had any girlfriends while I was at Furman. But anyway, I left Furman and went to University of California, Irvine, because I was offered the Chancellor's Fellowship, which was the biggest fellowship that was offered by the chemistry department. Basically, for my first year in college, I basically got twice as much as a normal student got. The Chancellor's Fellowship matched what I got from the university. And on top of that, I borrowed the maximum amount of money that I could borrow from student loans. And I had met a couple of girls there that I met while tutoring. While I was a tutoring. They have what they call RA position, research assistant, and TA. This is how you earn your money as a graduate student. As an incoming graduate student, you pick up RAs or TAs, research assistant or teaching assistant. And I was a teaching assistant for my first 2 years at the University of California, Irvine, in which I conducted labs. You know, undergraduate students would take chemistry classes and they would have to take lab. And so I would basically monitor and conduct and grade and oversee labs for large classes of students, undergraduate students. And I met a couple of girlfriends, beautiful young girls, while I was at UC Irvine. They called me the Dean of Transportation because I had 2 cars. I had a Fiat Spider, I had a motorcycle, and I had a El Camino. And I had a couple of girlfriends. And when I was at UC Irvine, and I was working for Dr. Wood Zeppis, and he was from Bear Lab. He had become famous as a picosecond spectroscopy guy. He elucidated the action of rhodopsin in the eye using picosecond spectroscopy. I was working for him, and so basically I was doing physical chemistry. You know, I spent my first 2 years trying to spent a lot of money on a picosecond X-ray spectrometer. We were going to try to make the first X-ray laser that we could analyze in the picosecond time domain. Very interesting experience at UC Irvine, and I did several other things. I set up the grading system for all the undergraduate classes. That was one quarter or semester. That's what I did. I kept all the grades. I set up a system and kept all the grades for the undergraduate students. And the professors typically had 300-400 students in their undergraduate classes. But anyway, it come to the point where I realized that I wasn't really interested in physical chemistry because it required classes in quantum mechanics, and I find quantum mechanics very interesting, but not interesting enough to really get into it and indulge myself. So I decided to change my focus from physical chemistry to organic chemistry. And I was accepted into the lab of the prima donna organic chemist there. I can't remember his name. But he accepted me in. He was very glad to have me. He knew I was a very smart student. And then the next day he said, "I've had a change of heart. As a matter of fact, I think you should leave the university." I know what happened. He had talked to one of his friends at Berkeley, and that guy from Berkeley told him what I had said to one of the students that I met there when I was interviewing the campus. And, you know, he realized that I was interested in drugs, so he didn't want me learning organic synthesis. And so then I got in with Marjorie Casario. Marjorie Casario is famous in her own right. The Casario chemistry textbook, that's her. Anyway, she accepted me, and I was just one of 2 students that were working under her, and I was working in physical organic chemistry. I was able to do a little bit of synthesis, but primarily I was studying gas phase reactions using a Fourier transform ion cyclotron resonance machine. And I spent about a year with her, and she decided to take a position as vice chancellor of academic affairs at UC San Diego. And she said, I'm going to leave, so you can, if you want, you can just, since you haven't finished the work that we were doing, you can leave UC Irvine with a master's degree and then go somewhere else or whatever. So I took the master's in chemistry from UC Irvine, and then I decided to go to UCLA, where I was interviewed by several professors that wanted me, and I went to work for Dr. Mullick. And I did very well for my first couple of years. And well, for the whole time that I was there. And then, of course, after about, I guess, my third year, I decided to get into the drugs. And it's very interesting because I was really not that interested in psychedelics. Primarily, I was very interested in just wanting to be a medicinal chemist, and I was wanting to study the drugs that were manufactured, the chemicals that were manufactured by plants, and try to search out and find medicine that could be chemicals made by plants that could be used as medicine. And they said there's no money in that, and they kept pointing me towards pharmaceutical industries and patentable drugs and that sort of thing. So anyway, as I learned how to make things, I decided that I wanted to make the meth. Now, as a teenager in high school, I sold pot, I got big into marijuana, and I worked for a rock and roll band. I grew my hair long, and then I got into LSD, and I sold and did a lot of LSD in high school. But anyway, I had forgotten about all that, and now that I was at UCLA and I was getting to be a synthetic chemist, I wanted to make the meth because I lost my high school sweetheart to the big meth dealer in town, and I never even got to try it. Actually, I was more interested in cocaine, but that was something that was very difficult to try to synthesize. Basically, you just get it from the plant. But meth is typically made in a lab, so I decided to make the meth secretly, and I couldn't get the normal starting point chemicals, so I devised a procedure that had not been reported, and I'm thinking, this thing said it would work. I'll make this and this and this and do this to it, and I should end up with meth. Well, it worked, but usually the first time you make something, you get a low yield, and that's what happened. I got a very low yield. I had pure crystal meth, but it was only enough for one dose. And anyway, I had decided that I was going to try to make some psychedelics, and I had the recipe for mescaline, and I had gathered the chemicals together. And it seemed a very quick and simple process, something that I could do in one night. So I took that one dose of meth, and I stayed up all night, and I made some mescaline. And I got enough mescaline for about 3 doses. And actually, I took very small doses. I split it into about 5. And the very first dose, I realized, wow, I was no longer very shy. I was more sociable. I was smiling, the whole time that I was under the influence of meth. And I said, this is something that I think I should pursue. And so then I made up my mind to make a lot of psychedelic drugs. And I got the book from Alexander Shulgin, Picow, Phenethylamines I Have Known and Loved, and I got Ticow, tryptamines I've known and loved. And I went through and discovered all of the syntheses that I could make based on what I could find on the shelf. I had the keys to the entire department. I actually found a master key in the storeroom that they didn't even know was there. It was a very old key that was hanging up in the main storeroom for the old chemistry building, and I had the keys for all the labs, but I didn't even need that. I mean, there were enough chemicals in our lab and in the general storeroom that I found starting materials for DOM and methylene and 2TB and IT290 and diethyltryptamine, dimethyltryptamine, DMT. So I made a whole bunch. I made what I could, and I ended up with a lot of 2TB. And with the 2TB, I found that I could stay up all night and continue the next day. And it was a very peaceful experience. It wasn't like meth that leaves you with a hangover and it makes you really wild and crazy while you're on it. The 2TB just allowed me to continue normally, to stay up all night, then the next day without any real effect, other than that it just kept me awake when I wanted to. I'd have to take it every 4 hours. I didn't smoke it or chew it. I would just put a little powder in my hand and lick it. And then within 15 minutes, I felt like I was weightless and I would be under the influence for about 4 hours. So anyway, I took a lot of 2TB, and then I could take it and go to work. I could take it during my regular working hours, and it just made me feel really good. Very pleasant, very nice high. People didn't think I was strange or anything like that. It wasn't as strong as LSD, for example. But anyway, then I had some DOM, and DOM is more powerful than LSD. It's a very psychedelic drug. It has visuals, and I really like the DOM, but I decided to save it for Friday night. You know, I decided to stop working 7 days a week. I told my boss, I said, I'm gonna start keeping the Sabbath, which is Friday night to Saturday night. So I'm gonna start taking a day off every week. And he was upset. He said, you know, why don't you think of it this way, that you bust your ass in graduate school and you work, you know, like a slave, and then you get out and then you got it made. And I said, well, why don't we think about it this way? I never have to suffer a day in my life. In other words, you know, if I don't want to work 7 days a week and suffer and struggle through graduate school, I'm not going to do it. So anyway, we kind of come to head about that, but I told him I'm going to take Saturday off. So Friday night, I would take DOM, and I'd go up to the top of the mountain where I live and just have very powerful experiences. Anyway, I took diethyltryptamine. I took a whole bunch of psychedelics. I was taking them every day, and then the strong ones on Saturday, that sort of thing. And then after about 9 months, I ended up with dimethyltryptamine, DMT. And dimethyltryptamine and diisopropyltryptamine are the two strangest psychedelics that I've ever made, and I mixed them together. The diisopropyltryptamine is very odd in the way that it affects your hearing, and dimethyltryptamine it's magic. It's a very scary drug. And since you cannot smoke or eat DMT, I mean, you can smoke it, but you got to have the right form. And I didn't make the form for smoking it. I made some, and I smoked it twice, and then I decided to turn the rest of it into the salt and just inject it intramuscularly. And I began mixing, and I would take DMT and I would put it in syringe and I would stick it in my arm or my hip. I tried different muscles, and the large muscles of my leg, the inner muscle of my leg, turned out to be actually the best part. So I would put it there, and I would have these extraordinary experiences under dimethyltryptamine. I would even take it while I was at the university. I would go in the bathroom and take a shot, and then, go out and just walk around for 15 minutes until it wore off. Well, then when I started mixing it with DIPT, it became very weird, very strange. And it was under the influence of that combination, which that drug spoke to me just out of nowhere, and it said, I am the elixir of life. Which, I don't know what that means, but I was very interested in what I was doing at this point, very much involved, and I bought every book that I could find on the subject. Anyway, it got weird, and I'm going to have to stop because my phone's running out of battery space, and I'll pick this back up.